Welcome to Ask the Lawyer radio podcast with attorney Brian Figueroa of the law firm Figueroa and Associates. This podcast features a recording of our most recent radio show. We hope you enjoy the show, which features news, views, and interviews on matters such as immigration, personal injury, bankruptcy, divorce, family law, estate planning, wills and probate, deed transfers, civil rights, criminal defense, workers' compensation, and taxes, both individual and business. You can contact us at 855-768-8845 or visit us at www.askthelawyer.us. You have questions? We've got the answers.
An attack on marriage to foreigners. Supreme Court ends decision in Department of State versus Munoz in a pivotal 6-3 decision authored by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. The Supreme Court ruled in Department of State versus Munoz that a U.S. citizen does not have a fundamental liberty interest in the admission of her non-citizen spouse to the country. This decision reverses a Ninth Circuit ruling that previously recognized a U.S. citizen's due process right to a factual explanation for the government's denial of her spouse's immigrant visa application. Justice Sotomayor, joined by Justices Kagan and Jackson, issued a compelling dissent, arguing that the denial burdens the citizen's fundamental right to marriage. This case highlights the ongoing tension between immigration law, constitutional protections, and the scope of judicial review and administrative decision-making. Background of the case. The case arose when Maria Munoz, a U.S. citizen, challenged the State Department's refusal to grant an immigrant visa to her non-citizen spouse, Alejandro Munoz. The government cited vague national security concerns but provided no factual details about the denial. Maria argued that this lack of transparency violated her due process rights under the Fifth Amendment by interfering with her fundamental right to marriage. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals sided with Maria, holding that the government's refusal to provide a factual basis infringed upon her constitutionally protected right to marriage. The appellate court emphasized that the government's decision-making process must respect the citizen spouse's liberty interests, even in matters traditionally subject to plenary executive control, such as immigration. The Supreme Court's decision to reverse this ruling represents a significant shift in the judicial approach to balancing individual constitutional rights and governmental authority in immigration matters. The Supreme Court's opinion, Justice Barrett, writing for the majority, framed the case as one primarily concerning the limits of judicial intervention in immigration policy. The opinion relied heavily on the doctrine of consular non-reviewability, a long-standing principle granting wide deference to executive decisions in visa matters. Barrett's analysis centered on three key points. 1. Absence of a fundamental liberty interest. Barrett rejected the notion that a U.S. citizen possesses a fundamental liberty interest in the admission of their non-citizen spouse. While the court has previously recognized the right to marriage as fundamental under the Due Process Clause, the majority held that this right does not extend to a guarantee of cohabitation in the U.S. with a non-citizen spouse. Barrett emphasized that immigration control falls squarely within the government's sovereign authority and cannot be subordinated to individual marital interests. 2. Historical precedent and consular non-reviewability. The majority underscored that courts have consistently refrained from intervening in visa denials, citing precedents like Kleindienst Vandal, 1972. In Mandel, the court upheld executive discretion in immigration matters, so long as a facially legitimate and bona fide reason was provided. Barrett extended this reasoning, asserting that the government's mere invocation of national security sufficed to meet this standard, even without disclosing specific facts. 3. Judicial overreach in immigration policy. Barrett expressed concern that expanding judicial scrutiny into visa decisions could undermine the executive branch's constitutional prerogatives in foreign affairs and national security. She argued that requiring the government to justify its decisions with factual specificity would set a precedent that risks entangling the judiciary in politically sensitive matters. The dissenting opinion, Justice Sotomayor's dissent, joined by Justices Kagan and Jackson, presented a forceful critique of the majority's reasoning. Sotomayor contended that the refusal to provide a factual basis for the visa denial infringed on Maria Munoz's constitutionally protected right to marriage. Her dissent rested on three primary arguments. 1. The right to marriage as a fundamental liberty. Sotomayor argued that the decision to marry and live with one's spouse is central to personal autonomy and liberty. She emphasized that the government's action effectively burdens the citizen's exercise of this right without adequate justification. 2. Due process protections. The dissent highlighted the procedural safeguards afforded by the Due Process Clause. Sotomayor maintained that the government's refusal to explain the visa denial deprived Maria of any meaningful opportunity to challenge or rebut the allegations against her spouse. She described this lack of transparency as a fundamental violation of fairness. 3. National security concerns and accountability. While acknowledging the importance of national security, Sotomayor cautioned against allowing its invocation to become a blanket justification for opaque decision-making. She argued that providing a factual basis for visa denials does not compromise national security, but instead ensures accountability and protects citizens' constitutional rights. Implications of the decision. The Supreme Court's ruling has far-reaching implications for immigration law and constitutional rights. 1. Reaffirmation of consular non-reviewability. The decision solidifies the principle that courts will defer to the executive branch in visa matters, limiting judicial oversight of immigration decisions. 2. Impact on citizen rights. By rejecting the notion that a citizen has a fundamental liberty interest in their spouse's admission, the court narrows the scope of constitutional protections in family-based immigration cases. This could lead to greater difficulties for U.S. citizens seeking to reunite with non-citizen spouses. 3. Potential for executive overreach. Critics argue that the ruling grants unchecked power to the executive branch, allowing visa denials to be justified with minimal explanation. This lack of transparency raises concerns about potential abuse or discriminatory application of immigration laws. 4. Future challenges and advocacy. The dissent suggests a possible avenue for future litigation, particularly in cases where visa denials are demonstrably arbitrary or discriminatory. Advocacy groups are likely to push for legislative reforms to increase transparency and accountability in visa decision-making. In conclusion, the Supreme Court's decision in Department of State v. Munoz underscores the tension between individual constitutional rights and the government's authority over immigration policy. While the majority upheld the principle of consular non-reviewability, the dissent highlighted the human impact of such decisions and the risks posed to fundamental liberties. As immigration remains a contentious issue, this case serves as a reminder of the complex interplay between the judiciary, executive power, and the rights of individuals.
Do you have a legal issue, question, or concern? Turn to Ask the Lawyer. You have questions? We've got answers. For a consultation or to refer a client, visit www.askthelawyer.us. Again, www.askthelawyer.us. You can also register for our paralegal program, get legal news, business consults, or other information on educational issues. Yes, Ask the Lawyer. You have questions? We've got answers. For a consultation or to refer a client, visit www.askthelawyer.us. Again, www.askthelawyer.us.